Hello, this is Ben. Today we will be talking about import tech. What we have here is a BMW inline 6, which is basically the same engine in my Z4 BMW. And one thing about 6-cylinder inline engines, they seem to be more responsive, because I had an SLK 350. That was a 3.5. There's a 3-liter. It wasn't as responsive as the inline 6, okay, and it's probably got a lot to do with the configuration of the engine. And right here is the famous RB26, which is the Skyline engine or cylinder head, and I'm going to show you the difference between these two. And the famous and really the pioneer of inline 6-cylinder as far as performance goes is the 240 280Z heads. Now, these are 4-valve heads like that. This is a 2-valve head, which is what represents a 240 and 280. Now, it looked like theoretically this got no chance, but we will touch bases on that, and it has a pretty good capability as well. Under the right circumstances, it can beat this too. All right. So anyway, here we go. Now, the BMW inline, the valves compared to this, which is its rival. Oh, let me not forget the 2JZ as well. I've done one of those. The buildup is on my Facebook under Ben Alameda Racing, and I started with the way the heads are configured, the intake, exhaust ports, and all that. And it's a very detailed buildup. And somehow I'll change that over to a video format later on. And I don't have a 2JZ cylinder head, but that's another one. Once you see the 2JZ, the RB26, and the BMW, and in fact I work on some the GT AMG V8, the bi-turbo and the NA ones. And that is pretty, I would say, the number one among heads. That includes even the Coyote Fords. I think the Mercedes 4V heads are superior by far. Anyway, that said, what I'm going to look at here and show is that the difference between these two in particular, for now, because I don't have a 2JZ. The BMW has got a bigger intake and exhaust valve compared to the RB26. Okay, theoretically speaking, this should show an advantage in turbocharged form. NA, not so much, I think. All right, but then again, this NA, it seemed like would have a better response than that. Okay, but also the calibration of the valve timing or their V-Tech, it just renders who is more effective, how the tuning is really dialed into the combination. But theoretically speaking, without taking those into account, all the valve timing stuff, this one will be more responsive. And I'll show you later, the exhaust port is not as big, but it's actually a little tad small. This is too big. That's why I said turbocharged, lots of boost. This one will dominate that. But once you fix the exhaust here, it will give it a good run. All right, so when you look at this, if you look at the port angle, it's high. The valve, the valve's right here. The intake port comes in almost straight down, and you can't beat that as far as airflow is concerned. But that being said, it's not all about airflow. It's a lot to do with the thermal efficiency of the combustion chamber, the head in particular, the pull of the exhaust, how it affects the intake during overlap. Same thing here. If you notice, this is about, oh gosh, where's my my caliper here? Let me show you what we're looking at here. The port floor here is about, this is a rough estimate, 200 roughly. Here the port floor is 1,450, about a 2-inch high, about 1.5, a little bit less than 1.5. So this one comes in a little low and then dumps into the valve. when you look at theoretical again, potential to make power, just talking about the intake port, this has the nod. Bigger valve intake, all right, than the RB26. But there are other factors in the equation. How much it swirls, if any, how much it tumbles, then that would be part of the mixture motion that creates power for an efficient burn duration. It's something that will effectively convert that heat energy into torque equals horsepower. Now, here is a Z240-280. I think the P79 has got the best chamber among the Z engines, but they put an insert here in the intake. Oh boy, once you take that insert off, you got to really weld it all over to get it right, and that is cost prohibitive because it's going to twist the head, it's going to warp it, stuff. But here, even though it's a single valve inline, let's see how the intake port height is about 1.650 inches, higher than this, but it's only a single valve. So when you look at this thing, this is like the how should I say this? Not the foster child, but the guys who bring it up the rear. All right, but anything today with racing, what's amazing is that everybody thinks racing inspired technology used on the street is the way to go. Not really. Like I always said, direct injection is great for racing, but it creates too much carbon deposits in the intake port, and then you got a lot of carbon buildup. Because this race cars with direct injection, they run and then take it apart, and then they go race again. But when your car is trying to do 100,000 miles, 200,000 miles, slowly idling by mom and dad, or maybe worse, grandpa and grandma, it will have issues with a carbon buildup on the intake port. Now, this one here, very basic, all right? The 4V is really overkill for the street. Without any of that valve timing control that they have right now, this might just give it a run, all right? Because the port sizing and everything, perfect for the RPM range on the street. 7,000, you know, under 7,000, excellent, excellent combination. This one here, 4 valve heads, 5 valve heads, come on, all right? I've done a Mercedes-Benz 4 valve head for a Daytona, 24-hour Daytona team based in Huntington Beach. And they have the bi-turbo and the NA V8s. I did quite a lot, manifold development and intake, cylinder head R&D. I was very impressed by that cylinder head. I have yet to see the Coyote Ford try to beat that. I don't think so, all right? Now, that said, these are really, if you're not revving the 8,000 plus, the 4 valve heads don't have much of an advantage, all right? It's just a little too much. But of course it sells cars because they go, oh, 4 valve head, just like the ones on the Indy 500 Formula 1. Oh, we gotta have one of those deals. Well, not quite, all right? So now with VTEC, valve timing, all that, it helps them because they have a very, very bad, even the RB26, the 2JZ, they have an Achilles heel. It's called reversion. And this one don't have none of that. Very, very minimum. So on the street, a tight track, not an all-out track where you're revving all the way to 8,000, 9,000 RPM. These guys will dominate. This won't get left out. But on street, 6,000, a little below 7,000, it'll be hard to beat. Now I'll show you why. Here is the typical Mercedes, Coyote Ford, BMW, RB26. You know, once you look at this 4V heads, once you see them, it's kind of hard to differentiate all of them because pent roof design, they kind of like copy each other. The only difference is the placement of the camshaft, how it's retained, and the combustion volume, combustion chamber volume, and the valve size. Otherwise, they're all basically the same. Now here, we have a little bit of a port angle shown here. But here's the deal. When it come in, flow straight, you hardly get any kind of swirl. Not like here, okay, because you're offset to one side of the bore. So it tend to come in and turn this way. Here, it's all coming in straight. There's no bend, straight into the valve, and they go, okay, and then out to the exhaust. So when you look at this combination, potential is great. Intake column comes in, does a little tumble, ignition, and out to the exhaust. Now, the problem with this scenario is that once it goes in and shoots out the exhaust, it has a tendency to shoot right back, exhaust spent gas and oil, and contaminate the intake, called reversion. And you'll kill the incoming fresh air and fuel. It kind of get diluted. Anyway, you ever guys see when they do those atomic bomb tests in there's a Wake Island or something like that in the Pacific, and same thing here in the Nevada desert, not that far from here. When the A-bomb blows up, right, and there's a building, the building gets hit by the shock wave of the explosion or the nuclear explosion, it falls down this way or leans this way, then automatically it comes right back. Okay, and same thing with those coconut trees and out there somewhere in the islands, in the Marshall Islands or whatever those were, where they do the Bikini Atoll, when they do the nuclear A-bomb test. The trees, initial blast, swing, and then shoot right back. Same scenario right here. Okay? Even though it's a little bit different, because once the exhaust shoots out and the valve closes, it creates a low pressure here. It's like it's pulling it like a rubber band. Okay, downstream down here. And because the valve is already closed, it wants to shoot right back into the combustion chamber, contaminating the fresh air and fuel mixture. Same thing with this guy here. No difference. Now, what they've been doing with valve timing, VTech, right? They kind of advanced that, the cam timing on the intake, some on the exhaust, but really the intake is the sensitive one when you try to advance the intake closing or delay the intake closing or earlier. It all comes into play. This will always be there, the reversion. Cross-contamination to the intake. They go boom, come in, compression, ignition, spark plug is usually here, comes out, intake valve closes, just like on a lawnmower, single piston. You feel when you have your lawnmower idling, you stick your finger on the exhaust port, it kind of like pushes out and suck it back in, push it, suck it back in, just like that nuclear explosion, right? But here the valve is acting as like a cork on the end, and it stretches the flow like a rubber band, and the low pressure wants to slam back in, and that's pulls your finger in. But there's always an opposite reaction to whatever just happened, just like that nuclear explosion. That is not a nuclear explosion in exhaust, but you see my point, okay? Exhaust out, comes right back in. And just like the A-bomb test, blows the freaking barn, it leans one side and then leans the other way and totally dismantles it. Now, on the Z, what we have is an inline configuration. What is bad here is the intake and exhaust comes in at the same side. The exhaust coming out here is great for emissions. Okay, it's great for warm-up. It's great for gas mileage because you're heating the intake column. But when you start going racing with it, if this is getting cool air, denser air, it's going to make more power. This one here is kind of a heated intake. Not necessarily good. But here it is. It comes in on one side, and when it come in, they swirl, and a little tumble because it's pretty high, higher than the RB26. Not as high as this guy, but it's still pretty high. When we look at the deck, see how high it is, the intake floor. It come in and out the exhaust. Like the same scenario with the exhaust coming right back. When it comes right back, guess what? It doesn't have an easy time to turn around. It kind of gets blocked because of the shift change in flow direction. Not like here, it's a straight shot. Remember also, when you port, just like on this flow bench, you improve the intake coming in. When you check it in reverse, as in reversion, it flows also improves. I haven't seen one where you improve the intake flow and reversion flow got less. It always gets better going backwards as well. You ported this, now it wants it to turn back, exhaust, it's ported, exhaust wants it to flow backwards to go back in here and go to the intake side and go further upstream. Bad scenario, okay? Now, this Z head doesn't have that. At the low RPM range, this is doggone very responsive because remember, part of the equation in power is the mixture motion. You have swirl, tumble, and compression, okay? Swirl has this situation coming in. The dynamics of flow come in and wants to, when it's swirl, it spreads everything evenly around the combustion space. And then with tumble, so you have this motion and then at the same time this motion. So it's this and this. So it mixes it real good and then the compression comes in, smack it and spread it all out and boom. You hardly have, what do you call that? Lean areas here, okay? Over rich mixtures here. Same thing here, okay? You got rich mixtures here, lean mixtures there. It doesn't have much mixture motion here. That is a problem. That being said, everybody puts a triangle valve job on their cylinder heads. This doggone things here does not need a triangle valve job on that exhaust port. Why is that? Well, you don't want the backflow to improve. When you put a 45 and a 30 on top of that valve, this one flows real good on the initial opening of the valve. It's under pressure. It doesn't need any help. It will exhaust out. With or without the back cut or the triangle valve job, it will go out. By the time it gets to max lift, boom, max lift, nothing is left. All the cows ran out. Or your horses run out of the barn. And you gotta open the doors a little bit more or more. Why? Don't need to be too big. And here's the next scenario. Once it backflows, when you have a triangle valve job, again, the flow going back gets enhanced. It gets better. So your cross-contamination gets worse. That's why I'm saying keep the angle 1 on the exhaust. Besides, this doggone engines, again, this racing things, 10, 12,000 RPM, 4 valve, 5 valve, great. But we're running the streets here. I think the red line is under 8,000. The Coyotes and some of the Mercedes-Benz, of course, and the Porsches, oh yeah, they go up to 8 plus. But not everybody has that kind of money for those kind of engines. This guy's here, 7,000. At that point, it's at the mercy of this guy here. If this has got compression and this got intake, throttle bars and all that, it can give it a good run for it. Definitely it'll leave the line harder than this guy because once it gets up on the RPM, the cross-contamination is lessened and this is starting to fade. But granted, if you got a lot of RPM, then you can say, sure, why not? Now, same thing with the Z head. One angle on the exhaust. Even more so when you got an all-out race car stuff. All right? And all these things about triangle valve job, tulip valve, here we'll touch base a little bit on the V8s. When you put a tulip exhaust valve, okay, that's the one that's like a pyramid shape, as opposed to the flat valve. It picks up flow here on the bench. Excellent. But the problem with the tulip valve is during overlap, and then when it backflows out, you give it a nice ramp to go back into the combustion chamber. It doesn't need it to go out because under pressure, the initial valve opening. But once you're in the overlap, when the piston's going up and the valve's starting to close, and you have the tulip valve like this, and the backflow is trying to come back, and you have the tulip valve, it gives it a nice ramp back to the combustion chamber. Boom. Great on the on the flow bench, bad on the racetrack. Okay, more likely than not. Sometimes when you do a dyno test, there's a little bit different. We've done tests for a Holly before with their FI, and they passed us about 4 with Del Snow, good buddy of mine. We tested the FI Holly injection on his car, and we were given 4 different carburetors, 650, 750, 850. The amazing part is, the one that is most on the dyno is actually slower on the track. And the one that was average posted the best freaking ET. All right, so just because it's good on the flow bench or good on the dyno, take it to the track. They'll tell you the big dividend as to what really happened. Here we go. Now, I've tested for a Pikes Peak engine before, a 4-valve Volkswagen engine, a 5-valve. And they told me, do my best, you know, do whatever I can do to help the flow, so for reversion. Try to get the recovery rate a little bit better. That means straightening out the port, trying to get the bends and the kinks to a bare minimum. Would you believe the 5-valve didn't show any more power than the 4-valve? Again, it's a selling point. What's next? 6-valve? Absolutely not. Sometimes I think, like on a 3-valve Ford Coyotes, I've seen some 3-valves very, very impressive. Because with a 3-valve, the exhaust is here. It's not a direct shot, okay? When the exhaust tries to backflow, it's not a direct shot to the valves, okay? So it kind of limits the reversion losses to a minimum. So I think in there, it will have some advantages, okay? Now, what the hell, what time do, oh man, we're running out of time. And I think I'll do the second portion about heads, this 4-valve heads in reverse, the exhaust port. Now, let me just go here and show you what I did. These heads are not done. What I mean is the BMW, okay? That's still not done. I did a preliminary cut. But to show you some of the things that I've done, right here, see that red spot right there? And the red spot right there? I've eliminated that. And here, the red ramp is gone from the floor and the roof, okay? Which is obvious there. It's like a ramp to nowhere, really. It's not in the direction of the intake pocket. Serves no purpose. Now, the RB is still, I'll be evaluating this thing, but I see major gains with this thing. And I'm happy with what I see. By the time I'm done, it'll be excellent. Now, it's got some bad kinks right there. That might be debatable. Either you make that blunt, or not blunt, but rounded off, or you make it sharp. Depends on the RPM range that you're going to do, because sometimes when it hits there, it disperses the fuel. That's the primary purpose of that blunt end right there. Now the Z, you notice the floor here is flat. You can do all the fancy work right here. If we don't correct this issue here, you're going to have problems. Okay? So one of the side things that bothers me is the center exhaust ports are way bigger than the side ones. Okay, so you're going to have a difference in flow there, and eventually it'll affect the whole performance of the engine. Now, let me put this back on. Oh, missed that thing. Now, on the Z, I cut the combustion chamber down 40 thousandths. My fix to that is this things on the cam towers. You have this little spacer that sits right there like that. Okay, well, there you go. And sit like that. Oh well, where the hell am I? Oh, I got the wrong one. I have the wrong one here. But anyway, the spacer is what I do is somebody switched this. Somebody probably got my things here. Oh, there you go. Excuse me. Now, since I cut the heads, the spacers sit on the cam towers like that. And what I do, I cut 40 thousandths off the deck. I use 2 of these spacers and sandwich that in there to push the camshaft in the original location up here. All right. So I had to order additional spacers for the cam tower to make up for the milling that I did on the surface. Okay, so I'll come back with the exhaust, and we will talk about this even further still, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so please subscribe to Ben Alameda Racing, like and share this video, and we'll go from there. Okay guys, talk to you later. Thank you very much.